All right, welcome back, everybody. We've got another story, another journey, another narrative. I absolutely love these types of things, and to be totally honest with you guys, I think it's almost been 10 years, Phil. We were talking about it just briefly in the green room. I think it's actually been 10 years since we've really gotten together and had a longer conversation, other than just some of the passing text messages and things like that. So I'm actually kind of excited to hear and catch up, just like part of your story, part of the narrative. So I'm really super excited. But thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know you've been busy with a lot of stuff, but thank you for taking the time to share with us. And we're gonna jump into this. But man, I appreciate you being here.
Thanks a lot, Tim. I mean, yeah, like you said, it's been a while,
Yeah,
crazy, and time goes fast like
yeah.
hell.
Yeah, I know. Well, and that was the thing. I mean, like, so you had me up at your event in Montreal. We had crossed paths several times with different, and I call them my ecom days. This was back when we were all kind of in this ecom, and it was truly like the Wild West out there. We were doing all kinds of stuff with T-shirts and whatever else we could get our hands on, and then things morphed into the Shopify, which is what everybody pretty much knows at this point. But back then, we didn't have Shopify. That didn't exist, right? We were trying to figure it out. So that was good. It was really good. I do kind of want to go into this because there are some things that I know about your life and some things that we shared, and I know you've shared with me personally, but I know that there's been a lot of transition. I know there's been a lot of challenges that you've overcome personally uh, to be able to be the success that you are now. And then we can even kind of figure out how we want to define success. But let's get started with what you thought life was going to be like as an entrepreneur and a business owner, and what what did you expect before all of this stuff actually happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit biased because my father was an entrepreneur as well.
Mm,
So, and he didn't leave the lavish lifestyle, but he had a very successful business. So it was the vision of being an entrepreneur is someone that was working on stuff that he or she liked actually, So that was really, being passionate about something and dig as much as you can do, and some sort of trying to build a legacy as well. I think that was my vision, and I can see that as well. I'm coming from a background of entrepreneurs. My grandfather as well was one.
yeah.
So and they all came from different backgrounds. So I think it was part of my DNA to continue on that, and even working inside businesses as an employee at certain point of my life, I felt that that was never made for me. So I feel like I'm born entrepreneur. I'm born
Right.
entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, I kind of you felt the pressure of the boundaries of being an employee, and then just kind of started pushing and wanting to stretch those wings a little bit more. So I'm curious, especially growing up in that, what were some of the beliefs or the formation of how life was going to be? And a lot of times what we talk about here on narrative is just, we sometimes get these false narratives or these false beliefs of how we thought we were supposed to be or how we were supposed to act and operate. Or even sometimes it's a pressure of, oh, you have to have an education or whatever. What were some of those beliefs that you had formed, and whether it was a direct, hey, my parents said you need to be this way, or it was just an impression based on the experiences and circumstances, but what were some of those beliefs that you had growing up, being a part of an entrepreneur type family?
I think that somehow my father, my family wanted like to protect us against being somehow an entrepreneur without saying
Oh,
it. So being like you go to school, you do, great thing. They want me like to become a computer engineer, so they pushed me on that way. And basically, because to get, a very good job, a job that was going to be paid well at that time, things
right.
still today, but things are changing, like, so and also, responsibility wise, so being an entrepreneur, I know there was a lot of pressure on my father. I know he had like a lot of
Right.
responsibility in terms of employees and things like that, and it was very stressful at home as well. We could feel that. So I think they want to like to push us in that kind of direction of go to school, do take a good job, and try to not, get into troubles and being stressed like he was. But actually, it's the total opposite, because I was felt too much pressure about doing the path that they designed for me, and I wanted to be free. And that's where the trigger
Okay.
is being an entrepreneur. You think you're gonna be free, and I think also that's what he wanted to prevent that I go to that on that path, because you're not free.
Yeah, there's a
That's
lot
the
more
truth.
work to it than you. Yeah. That's an interesting. So, try to think of how to ask this, but it is part of our parents. Obviously, want us to be better than what they were. They want
Yeah.
us to do more than what they did, and so they do, in all good intention. They do hope that we would go in a direction and influence us in a way that you don't have to. So what has been your experience then? Because if you felt the need or the not called society pressure to kind of go in the path of just getting a job, what's that been like? And how did you all of a sudden be able to say, nope, I got to go in this direction. I got to be so you're basically, shucking off the yoke that you've got there, and you're like, nope, I'm going to go in this direction. So what kind of process did you kind of go through in your mind to be able to say, no, I don't really want to go in this direction. I want to go in a different direction?
Yeah, basically, my dream was to be a professional classical guitarist. That
Okay.
was my dream, actually. It's something like didn't go anything with the path that my parents designed for me or anything like that. So, and finally, I found out that I was not going to be able to go pursue that dream, because I was not going to go to that specific school that would bring me there. So so sadly, I went to science, and then college to get into computer science, and I found out that that was not for me. And that's where I started to bounce in terms of what I can do, because where I am right now at that stage in school, I don't feel good.
Mm.
And I always love music. I always love production, because I was doing that for fun at home. And that's where I decided, what, I'm gonna drop out of school and I'm gonna start a recording studio. Actually, that's what I did, straight off. So I said, and for sure, parents weren't happy with that. I left home, some part because of that as well. And that's where I started my entrepreneur journey, actually,
In a recording studio, like
in
actually
a
sending.
recording studio. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
what was that? What was that relationship like? Because obviously there was tension there because your parents weren't happy that you dropped out of school. What was that tension like at home? And can you walk us through that relationship and how you managed that?
I didn't talk to my father for probably like 4 years,
Oh wow.
after, Yeah, yeah. So, so the tension was there, definitely. Because, yeah, we lost the relationship because of that, because I was not doing, and he probably had also some plans for me as well, because at a certain point I think he wanted to probably bring me back in his business so I can take care of that later.
Yeah.
But it was not the ambience I was looking anyway, so I wouldn't have been anyway a good fit. And because of the tension we got, it would have been like great working together, so sometime, even if you love your father or your mother or whatever, sometimes you're just not made to work together, and that's okay. You
Yeah.
have to put the boundaries, a line, a straight line,
Can,
and that's part of the game.
yeah. I was gonna say, can we just kind of pause on this one topic? And if you're
Yeah,
willing,
yeah,
how did you
yeah.
heal that? How is your relationship now? Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, my father passed away like 15 years ago now. So it's but I have like some back thinking about this period, and I have I can say that if I have matured as well, a lot,
Right.
so from all those years. And I think with the maturity I have now, I would have probably been able to work with my father, but I was too young.
Mm.
I was seeing like opportunities everywhere. I wanted like to prove myself as well. I think that was a lot about proving myself. I left out, I'm not following your path. I'm going to show you I can make it
Right.
by myself as well, you know? So it was, I think that was some sort of the fuel of pursuing entrepreneurship as well, and showing like I can do it as well myself, my own way, and I don't need technically your suggestion and your
Right.
approval or anything, you know. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I know a lot of us as entrepreneurs, we sometimes, in shaking off that weight of pressure of the direction, sometimes it does create that conflict and that tension. And I know from experience that there is a desire to have that relationship with your parents. There's a desire to have that approval from your father, to be able to say, yeah, you know, you're okay. Yeah, like
Yeah.
finally, was there ever a time when you were able to kind of heal or mend that relationship with your dad? And if so, then what did you do to?
Yeah, I think like before, probably 1 or 2 years before he passed away, we had I would say like a better
Mm,
relationship. I think he understood as well more. He was proud. I know, like from stories from other people that he talked, he was proud about what I was doing.
mm,
Um, I think that we made somehow some sort of connection, you know, through that time. um and I wish I could have he could have lived longer, so we could have probably built or
right.
rebuild, you know, that part that we missed for,
Mm,
you know, probably almost like a decade, you know. So um yeah, because like I said, I think it's some sort of maturity that we go through, and some experience that we go through, that now when we have a look back, we can more, you know, manage those kind of either
yeah.
emotions of way of thinking, understanding more, you know, why he was thinking like that.
Yep.
You can have like, you know, that kind of vision that you know, in that time when you're young, you know, you're
Yeah.
all pumped up, and it's really really different. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can totally hear you on that. But let's kind of go into, because I mean, you stated you started a recording studio. Now I know
Yep.
you're into coffee. I know you're doing some
Yeah.
consulting on AI. That's a big jump from recording studio to coffee. I mean, that's not a normal path that people take, right? So, what were the transitions? What were the challenges that you had to pretty much handle, overcome, solve in your entrepreneur journey? What were some of the big things that you had to deal with?
I think one of the strength that I've built through the years is pivoting, you know, being able to move or reinvent yourself
Mm,
through the time. And that came hard actually, because in the early 2000, what happened is accessibility to hardware to make your own music at home. That changed the whole thing. So when we started, we were really on that edge at that moment, where traditional recording studio was starting to lead the market share for them, or for, you know, uh, people in the industry coming in. It was getting easier to enter the music business because of this accessibility to hardware and making music at
right.
home. And the big recording studio was it was getting harder for them as well, for getting, you know, let's say smaller musician that are starting. So there was a gap. So we have identified that gap at that point, where we would be in the middle. So having like um, more accessible hardware, making it easier for emerging artists to come to record. And but, you know, the problem is pricing again. You know, the pricing, with emerging artists, and still today you're dealing with smaller budget, so you need a lot of volume. So it was very very hard to scale at that point for us. And I had a partner at that time. We've been like partner for almost like 12 years or more. And we he was a guy in the more on the field, doing events and things like that. So we started also promoting the recording studios with events that we were throwing out and all this kind of thing. That gives us a lot of visibility. and help us to gain some sort of notoriety as well on the scene, which led us to open a record label, starting signing a
Oh,
couple of artists here and there. But that was not enough, because the music industry, how it works, it takes time, it takes a lot of money. There's a lot of subside also that you need to get. And it's not, and still today I can tell you, it's not a very good business model. It's you know, and
yeah,
that's why also there's lots of you know the business is still consolidating even after the major crisis in the early 2000. It's still going that way. So we I have experience into radio. I used to be a radio host in the early days, so I we started brainstorming ideas with my partner at that time, and we say, you know what, we're gonna start a radio station. But since it's hard to get a license, a traditional license, we're gonna do it on the internet. And that was in 2002 or three, if I remember. And so we started doing the whole thing, getting the music, getting also the people that's going to help us, the programmation. And we found out also that there was a big gap at that point, because all radio stations were playing old music for old people still today. But
and now everything's
the
digital. I
young,
mean, like, shoot.
yeah, now I mean with digital, yeah, but traditional radio station have the same playbook than they have like 25 years ago,
Right.
so it hasn't changed. But for us, it was like, okay, we know youth love hip hop, love electronic music, and there's no radio station playing that. So we are going to do that, and that was a big hit for us. Until to a point we were starting getting major advertisers,
Yeah.
sponsors. Um, and we became like the top 10 radio station in Canada by Nielsen ComScore. So that was huge for us,
Mm. And everything was
because
online.
nobody.
It was an actual
It was
radio.
online,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
and nobody did that. We had like over 300,000 unique visitors back then per month. Nobody did that in the industry, and even we started getting calls from networks, big networks. I remember from radio station asking, how are you doing that? I mean, it's just like crazy. I
Yeah.
mean, you're just not following the trend. You're not following what people love,
Right.
and things like that. So that helped us to get a very strong position in the industry, in the music industry. And we st- the, that went well up until 2007, when Facebook appeared, and that changed everything, not only for us but for everyone
Yep.
online. Because back then you were paid, actually all the sponsoring deals and all this kind of thing, we were paid by CPM, cost per thousand, for landscape
Yep.
banners, skyscrapers banner, all those
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thing back then. So we lost 50% of our traffic almost overnight. And
Wow.
everything was, the business model didn't match up, because cost of streaming back then was very expensive, cost of hardware was very expensive. So we were paying multiple tens of $1,000s per month just in cost of servers and streaming and all this kind of thing. So that's where we had to find again a way. What are we going to do? We can get so much new customers, but there's a limit as well,
Right.
in
Right.
terms of what we can propose. So we have a lot of contacts. We work with big agencies that are buying stuff from us. So what we can do now to use that as a leverage. So we started an agency, but specialized in performance marketing, something that in 2008 was almost there was not a lot of people in that game. And we were selling by cost by lead, or acquisition. So we started like knocking on doors on insurance company, mortgage company, car dealers, and all this kind of thing. And we ran that until 2012, actually.
Yeah, just
So
let me clarify here, because I know exactly
yeah,
what you're talking about. Let me just clarify this one thing. So
yeah, go
when
on.
you're talking about revenue coming in, in the internet
Yeah.
space and in the online space, you have
Yeah.
a lot of different ways that you can get paid. You can get paid per impression, per view, per click, per acquisition, per call, per conversion. Like there's all these different things. And that's what you're talking about is you went from basically an impression to an
Yeah.
acquisition, which is a name and an address. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about,
Yeah.
is you actually get a physical name and an address, and then you resell that to another company. So there's a transition, a challenge in there where all of a sudden you lose all of these impressions, these people that are there, you're not getting paid for that versus the other aspect. So, and that's our ecom. That's the ecom
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Exactly. You got
but
it. You got it.
yeah, so that just for understanding, because I know a lot of people that are listening, they're, the traditional type, hey, I own a business, a customer comes in, they buy something
Yeah.
or it's a service. They come in and they have some kind of a service transaction. When you're dealing with the ecom space, it's so much different and it adapts so quickly. This is exactly what you're saying. It's like 1 minute you got 200,000 people showing up every month on a website. The next month you're like, where'd they all go? They're gone. So
Exactly. Exactly. So there was so that was a crazy time because we had to pivot fast to and also to, I won't say like rebuild, but adapt in terms of the expertise, because
yeah,
now we were buyers. We were media buyers. We were not anymore media sellers.
right.
We were buyers, and like you said, reselling
Yep.
those services to other business. So that changed a lot.
Yeah.
And sadly, we didn't have, today, people saying, oh, I mean, you lose half of your traffic. What did you do? You could have just starting using Facebook as a leverage to promote your business. But we didn't have that in mind. At that point, we've seen it
And
as
then
a
it was so
direct
different. Facebook
competitor
was so weird then.
also, but it was a direct competitor. Anyone that had other traffic source was a direct competitor. We didn't know how to leverage
Mm,
really others competitors platform to bring that back to us. So that the mindset was completely different back then. And that's why also a lot of businesses die, like those Friendsters and name it. There was like a tons of, and MySpace, probably one of the best example how they died
yeah.
fast because they couldn't adapt to what was happening with
Well,
Facebook.
it kind of reminds me, I think, if I recall, and I'm probably going to mess up some of these details, but it reminds me of Blockbuster because I mean, Blockbuster obviously went the
Yep.
way of the dinosaurs, right? But I believe Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix. If I
Yep.
recall correctly, they had the opportunity and they refused because they wanted to maintain a level of what they were doing with they wanted to make sure that they protected their VHSs and the DVDs and the whole 9 yards that they had there. So they opted to not buy
Yep.
Netflix. And then obviously times changing, things changing. Now we're doing all this streaming. I don't even know anybody that's got a VHS recorder tape thing in their houses anymore, or DVD players, or any of that stuff. So it's interesting that you're talking about that because it is definitely something, a challenge. How do we keep our minds? So I'm going to deviate here, so I apologize, but this is, I think, going to be a really good conversation. I
Yep.
literally just had this a couple of days ago with a friend of mine. And a lot of people have seen the memes where, you see this guy digging and, he stops and he turns around just before he gets to the diamonds and the gold and all that kind of stuff, right? Well, that's one image. But then if we contrast this other image with how many people had it in their minds that they're going to climb Mount Everest, and the Mount Everest path is literally littered with people that did not make it and then passed away on Mount Everest. I mean, they had every intention to summit. They had every intention to make it to the top, and then they never made it. And so we've got these two contrasting ideas, right? We have this one where you want to have that determination. You don't want to give up. You want to push through. I can actually put Blockbuster in this group, right? They had to push through. They were going to, and then, they died away. And you got the other side, which is like, well, you gave up too soon. Well, is that giving up too soon, or did you adapt? So these competing things, especially when our economy and markets are changing so fast. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Phil, because I know we've talked some deep stuff before, but how do you know when to adapt? How do you know when to persevere? How do you know, like, are there factors that give us the ability as business owners and entrepreneurs to say, no, we've got to push through this. This is a challenge versus this is a dead end and we're not going to make it. We have to adapt. We got to change. We got to move.
I think it's part, I'm gonna compare that to probably survival instinct.
Hmm.
I think that there's people have higher survival instinct than the others. And it's same thing in business. So there's people that are early adopters as well, that they're ready, to move and follow, on that new trend very fast because they see an opportunity. And there's the other ones that are just focused on one thing and they think it's going to be always the same, and same thing as business as personal, like there's a lot of people now that just don't want to go with AI because they don't feel it's good, they don't feel that they understand it,
Great point.
and it's and a pen and a paper is still good for them. Yeah, sure, a pen and VHS, we can still listen, get a VHS and good for you, but you won't have the same experience, quality, sound, and whatever, and that at the end it's a bit of your choice, so I think it's a good parallel because probably at that point the CEO of Blockbuster thought that there was nothing better than the DVD technology or Blu-ray technology, and that will never be surpassed by any streaming company.
Hmm.
Probably that is possible because he probably made his research also before um, turning off the deal. Because streaming at that point, because I can tell you because I wasn't streaming, so I can tell you at that point, and actually how Netflix did it, it's because of Amazon. Because if they did never strike the deal with Amazon, they could have never done what they did today. Their real bottleneck back then was not license, it was streaming.
Hmm.
And the way they did it, that's what changed the game completely compared to Spotify, the streaming on audio was already years in advance compared to video streaming. So at that point, probably like Blockbuster said, is like, I mean, we have time. We have probably 10 years, before this thing.
Yeah.
So why I'm gonna buy these guys for, I don't know, like 58 millions when I'm gonna take my 10 years that I know it's gonna be great, and I'm gonna have time to build it, and then we'll be ready. So the timeline as well
Yeah. Yeah.
is another factor.
No, I love that survival instinct illustration that you just used because I think it is part of it. And some people just kind of get a sense for when things are going to pop and when they're not. And then you do have different personalities. So,
Yep.
I mean, like there's a lot. And I know that you're in AI now. So I know you're an early adopter. And that's been the case with all of your ecom stuff. But what do you like? I mean, I kind of want to know, what are you doing now? What is the things that you're building now? What are the practices and the processes in order to keep your mind nimble? I mean, maybe you're naturally an early adopter, but at some point in time, as we get older, we kind of get set in our ways. And so what do you do to keep your mind like, hey, I need to be able to see some of the stuff that's coming in the future?
So I mean, I can go back a bit with the coffee part because I,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think this is another trigger, that happened in 2020 with the COVID. So I was already in the consulting business a couple years before that. I met a friend. We became a friend actually after consulting for his business. He had a coffee business, and that's where I started digging into. And I already had like GothRider brand, launched that earlier as a drop shipping brand. It was, and then it moved to jewelry, and then it moved to coffee. But it has a lot of, and that's the part of it. It's testing a lot of things down to something, it's gonna stick. And I've started, digging into coffee business, and I've seen that, coffee is probably one of the most consumable products in the world. It's still growing. I was seeing like it's not growing big because at certain point in the market, you're not getting at a point of saturation. I don't believe in saturation, but it's slowing down. So
Yeah.
if we're talking about, the and it depends in the waves also, capturing the people's attention, so uh, in all product there's always a first wave where you introduce something and it got like people's attention, and then it moved to a stage and then another stage, then it captures, the whole world at a certain point. Like any kind of beverage, or best example is probably Red Bull.
Mhm.
Red Bull was very obscure when it started, and it took like almost 20 years to capture the whole world. But the first
Mountain Dew was the
years,
same way. Yeah, Mountain
yeah,
Dew was.
exactly same thing. So it's, and at a certain point now, I mean, everybody knows about energy drinks, but there's still energy drinks coming in because we're in that, I will not say last trenches, but last part of, if you still are in a market that is still growing and not declining, and it goes at 5% per year, that's still very, very good, because 5% per year for multiple billions of dollars,
Mhm.
it's a lot. So when I was digging into coffee, I was seeing that. I mean, it was still 5% growth, or 5.5% growth year over year. Was like, okay, wow, that's crazy. And I was starting seeing like that Asia and Middle East are starting getting in the bandwagon of now turning into coffee. So I say, I mean, it's not the end. I mean, there's definitely something that is moving there. And when I did a little like a survey to my customer base already, I asked them, if we had to go through introduce a consumable product, would it be coffee? Would it be proteins or supplements? Would it be cosmetics? Because I had all that in mind. And finally, what came first? It
Coffee.
was coffee.
Yeah.
So, and the timing was there. I was consulting someone into the coffee business. COVID happened. I said, I call my friend. I say, you know what? I mean, I have an idea. Would you be interested to help me, like, to turn my business into a coffee business? We'll build a blend, and we started with the gasoline blend, and in 6 weeks we turned the business from jewelry to coffee, and we started like a few months after selling tons of pounds per month
Mm.
of coffee. So basically it was a kind of a risk as well, because I didn't know, and I had also to put a lot of money on the table because it was a new venture. Even if you had the customers, I didn't know if that was going to follow,
Right.
so that's how this happened, in terms of adapting and figuring out, is there a trend, is there something we can move on, and we can bring what we have so far. So definitely that was the trigger point.
So, what was your biggest thing that you learned by doing this? Because now you're a couple years into the coffee aspect of things.
Yeah,
What was your biggest lesson that you said, "Hey, this was my takeaway, and this is I'm glad I took the risk. I'm glad I was able to jump on this."
I would say that the the biggest thing is, so let me be honest, is it's a very hard business because it's very competitive.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And the
everybody
problem
knows
is,
Starbucks, so
exactly, and the problem is definitely not fighting against smaller brands, because, like, just in Quebec, where I live, it's a province with 8 million people. There's 400 roasters. It's
wow.
400. This is huge. It's probably one per capita, is probably one of the biggest. Then probably you have California, that has one of the biggest as well, in the United States. So there's probably two provinces in Canada. There's BC, British Columbia, and Quebec, where they have the most prota. In the US, I think it's Seattle. It's about, I mean, Washington State, California, and I think it's Maine or New York. That they have the most per pro. So we are in those big, but we're not competing against ourselves. We're competing against the big ones, because the big ones have the biggest market share.
Yeah.
And the problem is, the industry in coffee hasn't changed so much for so many years, and you can compare that to directly beer market. It's exactly the same thing than it was in the 90s. Exactly the same thing. You had like the smaller micro brewer,
Yep.
so same thing. And then this became bigger. At the time, they got bought by other big companies, and this is exactly where we are right now. It's that exact same point. So we are in 2026. We're probably 1996 year of beer now.
Mm.
This is the exact time frame. So the good thing is, I can see myself in 20 years probably selling the brand to a bigger one, you know?
Yeah.
So you cannot build this business as the usual, let's say, quick rich scheme
Yeah. Yeah.
type of
Yeah.
we're gonna scale that to $100 million in 3 years and we're gonna sell to another business. No, it's not working like that because it's coffee. It's a
Yeah.
commodity that everyone knows. You have to build it on longevity and legacy, and that's actually that cost me a lot to understand that part. A
Mm,
lot, I'm gonna tell you.
yeah. And it's interesting because you're saying it has nothing to do with the cost. I mean, it does a little bit. You have to have a good product,
Yeah,
but
yeah, absolutely.
there's 400 people there that believe that they've got a good product. So what are you going to do that's different than those 400 roasters that you've got in just year one Providence? How are you going to differentiate yourself? How are you going to get the attention of the big dog like Starbucks, whomever? How are you going to get their attention in order to even be considered to be bought out?
Exactly. So what we did is the branding.
Yeah.
We had to come up with something that was, I would say, very, very, very few were doing, like something much more edgy, aggressive, rock and
Yeah, yeah, and
roll.
your stuff is
To
edgy. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that like it because it's edgy, and they're like, yeah, like it's definitely. If you haven't checked it out, I'm gonna just take this pause here. But if you haven't checked it out, it's Goth. Oh boy, I can't even talk today. GothRider. It's GothRider, and if you just did a search, I'm telling you, it's gonna pop up because it's becoming more and more popular.
Yeah, thank you. And sadly for our US friend right now, we don't ship anymore to the US because of customs, but we are working hard to come back. We have a huge fan base also in the US, and
Yeah.
one
Well, I
one
live
part
close enough. I
we
might be able to drive across the border for you,
Oh yeah,
maybe.
if you drive across the border, yeah, no problem, no problem. But one thing because of that, you see, we weren't talking about things we cannot control,
Right.
customs, you know,
Yep.
and we lost 40% of our revenues because of that.
Wow.
I mean, almost in 60 days, you know.
Wow.
So we had to rebuild everything from the ground. We had to refocus the business elsewhere. At that point we had like two huge peak as well of how can I say of orders, you know. So losing a part, getting back a
Right.
lot of orders, but you know, managing cash flow and all this kind of thing put us in the rough points, you know.
Right.
So so yeah.
Wow. Wow. So, I mean, we're getting kind of close to the end here. We're going to have to start wrapping up. But what do you, like, especially if you look at your own personal life, what would you say that the greatest lesson is that you've learned over the last several years going through multiple different transitions and industries? I mean, it's kind of all the same industry, but it's different because when you're online, it morphs from product to product. They still have a lot of similarities. But what would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned to be able to keep going, to keep focus, and to stay on track?
Yeah, I think it's being aware of what is happening in the world globally.
Mm,
There's a lot of tools now that are, you know, that are accessible that help you that, but it's very important to also focus, you know, on what you are good at. So when you're good at one thing, focus to be the best on at it, you know.
yeah.
And but you can be passionate by a lot of stuff. That doesn't mean that because you cannot, you have to focus, you cannot do other things, you
Right.
know. It's just like need to be focused on the thing you're going to do. And that's one thing I did this year, is like to review what I'm how I'm going to separate a bit, you know, what I love and what I need to do and what I can handle. And that's
Yeah.
one of the reason with GothRider we changed a bit the model this year, so I can focus really on helping, you know, businesses and enterprise, something that I really love and enjoy doing it with my agency,
Yeah.
and have GothRider fully automated, but still keeping the marketing of it because you know, it's my
Yeah.
baby, so I
Yeah.
cannot leave it, you know. Um, and the other thing is most important is, I think is the simplest like thing we can, you know, after all this year, you know, it's more about running a marathon. It's not, you know, it's not a sprint. It's
Right.
not a sprint. We have to remove that stress and anxiety that the society is pushing on us, you know.
Right.
It's definitely not. And I can see, a lot of stories of big brands that took like 20, 25 years. Even like Ferrari. If you listen to the story of Ferrari or read it, you're gonna say like this guy. It took us like probably like 40, 50 years to become the Ferrari we know today.
Yeah,
You know, so we forget about that
that's
because
true.
things are it's going too fast.
Yep.
So nobody is pushing you. And last thing is, if you're in business, build closely with your customers.
Mm,
Build as close as possible. I think it's building a relationship with them, a community as well. But these are the people will care the most and will support you through all those years.
yeah.
There's nothing else. There's no quick way around or anything else like that.
Yeah, that relationship with the customer is probably the most valuable aspect. So, all right, is there anything else that's on your heart? Like, hey, man, I just got to share this one thing. Or are you good? And maybe that was the
I'm
mic
good.
drop.
I'm
Or
good. I mean, we can talk for hours for sure.
no, but this has
Yeah.
been fun and really, really good. So, how can people get in contact with you? I know we've stayed connected multiple different
Yep.
ways. I know you've got the consulting with the AI, you've got the GothRider, which is the coffee stuff. How can people get in contact with you or with the businesses, or what's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that they can contact me through LinkedIn. For sure, Phil Cipriano, they type that. They can see me. Or also X. I'm very active on X. That's
Okay.
where most of my community is. Anything about AI or even e-commerce. I'm still doing a lot of consulting for e-commerce. So they can reach out, or you can find me also on Facebook. For the agency, it's ubv.com. So HUBBVEE.com. There's a form there as well. You can contact me directly.
Yeah.
So
Can you
here
go
you
ahead and
go.
go ahead and spell like your handle for X, and I'm assuming
Yeah.
it's your name for LinkedIn, but
Yeah. So x.com/Phil, PHIL, Kiprianou, KYPRIANOU.
there, there
There
you
you
go.
go.
Yep, perfect, perfect. So, well, I mean, again, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. There's a lot of cool things that are going on, and I know within your life you've always got something that you're innovating, kind of working on. So, thank you for just taking that time and sharing with us. For those listening, we're going to put this up on YouTube. We'll have that there. You can kind of see the additional interaction, the nonverbal communication that happens. So if you want to take a chance and go look over there, then we'll have some other stuff up on LinkedIn. But until next time, I want you guys to keep writing, keep crafting your story, because your story is valuable. What you do and what you say is worthwhile. And yes, there's challenges, just like what we had talked about here. There's all kinds of adjustments, and we have to stay adaptable because life is going to change. But it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. So keep writing, keep crafting, and we'll talk to you guys next time.